Okay. All right, welcome to another episode of a Documentary Podcast. I'm Josh.
And I'm Catherine.
And we are two filmmakers who like to talk about nonfiction cinema.
Yep.
In America. Or wherever.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe this will go global.
Yeah, this is a global phenomenon. Really.
Yeah. Or I want to move back to Canada, so maybe that'll happen.
Hey, there you go. Back to Canada?
Yeah, I lived there for 6 years.
Oh.
I went to undergrad there and then spent 2 years after just kind of ski and surf bumming around the country.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting. Where in Canada?
In BC, so Vancouver and then Vancouver Island.
Nice. I hear Vancouver is really beautiful.
It's beautiful. I have this documentary I want to make about Vancouver Island at one point, so
nice.
I'll have to go back, yeah.
Cool. You should do that and hire me.
Oh, I will. I think everyone needs to go there. It'll change your view of the world.
Absolutely. That sounds great.
Yeah, so it is. So what have you been watching?
So I just watched this film that my friend Joe told me I should watch. And I've passed by it so many times, but like it seemed like it might be gross or something. But it's called Rat Film. And like rats as in rats, you know.
Okay,
like
yeah.
Big mice. So I had no idea what it was. My friend Joe told me to watch it, and he is like one of the strangest filmmakers I know, which I mean in a positive way. He makes really like clever movies that are just strange and don't make any sense, but they're beautiful. So when he tells me to watch something, I know that it's going to be interesting. And one of the most unique documentaries I've ever seen. And the voiceover in it is amazing. The cinematography is amazing. The whole story and how it unfolds is amazing. The first shot to the last shot and how it all ties together. It's like super intentional, super unique. Everyone needs to go watch it because it's pretty incredible, actually.
So yeah, that's also being added to my list.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say too much about it just because, like, there's a lot there, actually, like, when you go watch it. Yeah, so it came out in 2016. It was directed by Theo Anthony, and apparently he has another documentary coming out soon.
What's that one on? Does it say?
My friend just told me that it's coming out, but let me see. So it's called Coffin Maker, I think.
That sounds like something like Errol Morris would do.
Yeah, Coffin Maker. So filmed through the Democratic Republic of Congo in the final days of devastating 3-year war, Coffin Maker weaves together 3 separate journeys. A coffin maker in Goma, frontline footage of a rebel army in retreat, and a mass funeral for military officers killed in the conflict.
That sounds really interesting, actually.
Yeah, this filmmaker I'm really excited about them. And I can just read you so this is the synopsis for Rat Film. Across walls, fences, and alleys, rats not only expose our boundaries of separation, but make homes in them. Rat Film is a feature-length documentary that uses the rat, as well as the humans that love them, live with them, and kill them, to explore the history of Baltimore. There's never been a rat problem in Baltimore. It's always been a people problem. So all I can say is just watch it.
Yeah.
Be open-minded, because I didn't ever want to watch it because I didn't really want to watch something about rats.
Are there a lot of shots of rats, though, as someone who really can't stand the look of them?
I honestly, there were some parts that I couldn't really watch because I'm also like that. And I hate to be that way because, like, rats, when they're clean and they're, like, when they're just, like, living in a cage or something or whatever, they're so cute. But
really?
I don't know. But whenever they're, like, crawling around your house or something, I don't know, the first shot was kind of rough to take, but
Okay.
when you, just as a film, just like close your eyes on the parts that you think are too gross or something.
Yeah.
Because like as a film, like even that first shot, like it ties so well into like later on in the film and what the whole story's about. It's pretty cool.
Cool.
What about you? What have you been watching?
So I haven't been watching as much lately because the ski season's been really good. And also it's like super nice in Denver lately. But I recently watched, and this will tie into what I talk about later, Pope Francis, A Man of His Word, which is Wim Winders' most recent documentary. At first I was like a bit confused why he was doing a documentary on the Pope and about religion. But I definitely recommend watching it. As someone who's not very religious themselves, I still took away a lot from it because he structures the interviews with the Pope. I was shocked at how much access he got and how much transparency the Pope was willing to give in his interviews, which just as a way to learn about the Pope was very interesting. But he structures it like a sermon that 2018, 2019 needs to hear. And it's definitely very pro-environment, pro-humanitarian aid, but not humanitarian aid in that, like, let's go fix these countries. It's more of we need to look out for lower classes and have more economic stability across all walks of life. So I would definitely recommend it, and I believe it's now out on streaming.
Yeah, I think is it playing on Netflix right now? I'm pretty sure.
I think it's either on Netflix or like Amazon. I think it's on Amazon.
Oh yeah. It is on Amazon.
Yeah.
And it is really good. It's a really beautiful film.
It's super beautiful, and you don't have to like the Pope or believe in Catholicism or even the institution to like this film. It is a bit hard. I will admit, going in knowing what the Catholic Church has done to separate the two things. Mm-hmm. But if I was able to separate it, I think most people will be able to. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that this new Pope is like a really interesting person, and it's nice to hear him talk.
It is. He's very well spoken.
Yeah, especially about a lot of these issues that Wim Winders brings up. And, and you know, he's just one of the classic filmmakers, and he just knows what he's doing. He
knows how to structure a film.
Yeah, exactly. He knows how to prep for a film, and he knows how to ask a question, and he knows how to carry on an interview. So the fact that this movie is like mostly based on interview is like not a problem because he's doing it.
And he kind of ties it back to it's weird. He had a strange ability to make me believe that the institution of religion isn't horrible, or like what it was set out to be, and what popes have been in the past, and sort of how this pope is at least attempting in a way to sort of bring that back. More about humanitarian efforts and looking out for all people and less judgment, which was nice to see.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shout out one more that I just watched called Generation Wealth. And it's from photographer Lauren Greenfield. And she has a history of like photographing like really rich, powerful, famous people basically. And she kind of takes a lot of this work that she's done and she makes a portrait kind of about people's obsession with materialism, and being obsessed with fame and their image, and just kind of like this era of like late capitalism that we're living in. But she does it in a way that feels like not super judgmental. It's like really easy to like judge all these people and like not look at them as human beings. And she really like humanizes a lot of these people that we just automatically hate because they're obsessed with fame and stuff. But she does it in a way that's like really compassionate and like it's just a really beautifully made film, I think. So I don't have too much to say about it just because it's like one of those films that was like, it didn't like have a huge impact on me per se, but it did kind of like put that perspective there on that whole lifestyle and just kind of this world that we're living in right now, and a lot of the young people being so obsessed with fame.
Yeah, and where can that one be watched?
Oh yeah, so that one is an Amazon Film actually, so it's on Amazon Prime.
Cool.
Yeah, and you can stream it now.
Yep.
For free.
Yeah, that's what's cool about docs is pretty much all of them go to streaming sites and for free.
I know, right?
Yeah. So no excuses for not watching
I
them.
know. And it's also a bummer because they don't ever play in theaters.
Gosh, I know. I think that's also one of the reasons why I only have one to talk about today is that there's really been nothing in theaters. And I'm one of those people who, well, one, I broke my projector, so I don't really have a great way to watch films right now.
Mm-hmm.
But two, I need to see things in theaters if I can.
Why did you break your projector? Were you like,
it fell off the tape. Well, it was a bunch of casualties, but the couch fell over, the table fell over, and then the projector fell over. So it was just like a domino effect, and then I was like, oh no. And of course, the only thing that broke, the glass table didn't even break, but the projector did. So I have to.
Or did you get so mad about the Catholic Church covering up sexual abuse that you just threw it against the wall and then broke the couch?
No. Oh, I know.
I'm sure I will. All right, so today's main topic is we're talking about our favorite documentary filmmakers. And yeah, go ahead.
So who did you choose, or did you find just as much difficulty picking people as I did?
Yes, I did actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna I don't really have a specific order or anything. Mm-hmm. I'm just gonna name some of my favorites, but the first one I'll start with is Alex Gibney. So he did his latest film is an HBO film called The Inventor, which I talked a little bit about in the last episode. But Alex Gibney has a long history of kind of like calling out corruption. Like he's definitely less of like I don't know if I necessarily love his films from like an art filmmaking perspective, but as far as like a political storytelling perspective from like keeping power in check and just kind of being like
how he like uses the media.
So how he's like well researched, and his films do look really good, and they're really well put together, and they're really well researched, and they're just like good films. So he's done like Going Clear about Scientology. He did Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room. He did Taxi to the Dark Side. He did 0 Days, which is about nuclear proliferation. He did one about Lance Armstrong, Steve Jobs, The Man in the Machine, Client 9, Casino Jack. I mean, he's like one of my favorites of his is actually called Park Avenue, which kind of like talks about the story of New York City and just like the inequality in the city. So he just has a long history of doing these films, like just kind of covering different issues, people, also like producing other people's films, like having like he's just so prolific. He has like a huge documentary come out every year, I feel like. So and
that's hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to mention like his production company like puts out other people's films. They have a Netflix series called Dirty Money. He's just all over the place. So just as far as like the amount of work he puts out, that's also like really well done.
Yeah.
And he kind of like does similar to what like Michael Moore does, but without putting himself in it like that, you know?
Yeah.
Where he's like making these political films and they're a little more well researched and stuff. Like I feel like Michael Moore was like my gateway to political films, but Alex Gibney is like the constant.
Your actual,
So, so
that's
definitely,
sort of,
Go ahead.
I'll say that's how I feel. He's not on my list, but how I feel about Frederick Weissman, who was really hard to cut from because I just chose 3 to talk about. But still, like he puts out a film every year for the most part. Also, these films are like 3 to 4 hours long.
Yeah.
And I think he's one of the best masters of documentary editing as well. Like how he's able to capture a location in a space without using any interviews. I think just is incredible. But yeah, he was didn't make the cut, but is still like one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, I need to see more Weissman. I'm sure that like I haven't actually gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch a 3-hour documentary about the library yet.
Yeah,
but I'm sure it's gonna be amazing when I get into it.
It's one where you need coffee and snacks and be ready to get a headache, because it takes like an hour for you in pretty much all of his films to figure out like what is the point, but then you start to realize like, oh, that was his thesis, his introduction, and then it slowly weaves into the, like different sort of themes, but his films are great. But yeah, that's why I try to see them in theaters if possible, because I actually saw his last two in theaters, Monrovia, Indiana, which is sort of about small town America and how its relevancy right now, and then the one before Ex Libris about the New York Public Library system. But yeah, those were both in theaters, and I don't think I could have made it through them if I was at home. They were still good though.
Yeah, I know there's a bunch of his films on Canopy right now, so if you have access to Canopy, go. Yeah. I know the library one's on there. He has one about dance on there. There's one just called High School on there that he did. There's a lot of Weissman on there, so I need to start diving into it.
And it's cool because if there's any sort of institution you want to learn about, especially within the States or even Europe, he'll have a film on it.
Yeah.
So it's a great sort of fly-on-the-wall way to learn about a subject very, I think, objectively.
For sure.
Yeah.
So that was my political pick.
Yeah.
Like less of like the how I want to make films, or less of like the art of films, and more just like somebody who's prolific, who I always watch his films when they come out, and I always know it's going to be interesting and challenging every time I see that Alex Gibney did it. So
cool.
And The Inventor might be one of his best, so definitely go watch The Inventor.
Everyone's talking about that, and great reviews.
Absolutely. So what about
So
Weissman wasn't your first.
Yeah. He wasn't my first, and that was hard to cut because I wanted to include a female filmmaker. And so sort of a newcomer who I'm really interested where her career goes is Jennifer Peedom.
Okay.
She's an Australian documentarian. She did Sherpa. I think I may have talked about that already on the podcast. The one about the devastating Mount Everest avalanche that killed the 16 Sherpas in 2014. She does a really interesting job at bringing new elements to sort of outdoor and adventure films. She brings in a lot of culture and history and spirituality, and really bringing in the people who are actually being effective, but then also they're very artistically done. Because her newest film called Mountain, she collaborated with the Australian Chamber Orchestra. So as they're projecting these beautiful images of mountains, they had the Sydney Orchestra playing along with William Dafoe narrating this outdoor writer. His name is Robert McFarland, his work. And so it's this very artistic but still engaging piece about the outdoors and mountains. And I really like how she's testing the boundaries of documentary in ways I haven't seen before. Yeah.
Nice. And she did that film Mountain?
Mountain. That's on Netflix. Highly recommend.
Cool. It's on my list, actually, and I haven't gotten around to watching it yet, so I'll have to do that.
It's cool because if you really like the outdoors, it's not just about the thrill-seeking and the adrenaline. She brings a more subtle, human, and a really beautiful eye to the outdoors that I haven't seen before.
Nice.
It's not just like, look at that sick line. It's like, no, look at the people, look at the people and the stuff they're doing. Yeah. So Sherpa 2, I really recommend. That's actually one of my favorite documentaries too. Because it's not just about Everest. It's about who's actually really being affected by the industry up there.
So we're at my second pick?
Yes, second pick.
So this one was hard.
Mm-hmm.
So hard. Because there's so many filmmakers I love, but I am going to shout out Chantal Akerman. So she's going to be my number 2. I just love her films so much. Anyone who knows me for any amount of time knows that I'm really interested in minimalist art and how powerful it can be if you're living in a moment, or like not necessarily living in a moment, but living in a film. And whether it's her narrative films or her documentaries, she does this so beautifully. Her films are really about the place, the tone, the surrounding circumstances. So one of my favorite ones I've mentioned in the past on this is a documentary called South, and she goes down to Jasper, Texas, shortly after this man who got drugged behind. It was a black man who got drugged behind a car or a truck by a couple like white supremacist garbage humans. And just the way she explores this story and makes it really about the town without it ever explicitly being like this true crime film or anything. It's really about how the town reacted to it, and the way like there's no real sit down interviews. Like there are people talking to the camera sometimes, but usually it's no more than like they're answering one question at a time, or you're with this person just for like a little. It's really a portrait of Jasper, Texas. And it's just so well done. But she's just such a great filmmaker. I just love her. Every time I see one of her films, it's like I wish that people talked about her more. She hasn't. I've actually seen a lot more of her narrative films than I have like her documentaries. But her documentaries like forever changed how I look at how you can make a film.
Yeah.
So I'll say that.
Cool. And for my next pick, I feel like exactly the same way. And so Wim Winders, I've been like obsessed with for quite a while now. And similarly to Akerman, he really puts an emphasis on the place and the moments in time, and that I feel like the location and the space is just as much of a character as the characters or the humans are. And like how he deals with sort of isolation and being a bit more nomadic and not finding where you're at yet. I really like, and that crosses over between both his narrative and doc. So he does a lot of both, and I would say his narratives are just as good as his documentaries, so watch those if you can. But yeah, he's a great filmmaker. I don't know, his probably most popular is either Pina, which is about the choreographer Pina Bosch, or Buena Vista Social Club. If you love music, like that film's incredible. He goes down to Cuba and films a bunch of musicians there, and the cinematography is incredible. Like his cinematography is always incredible. He knows how to use movement really well in his films. So
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll back that up for sure. I've seen actually a lot more of his narratives than I have his documentaries, so I need to dive into those a little more.
His docs are just as... See, I prefer thematically his narrative films, like Alice in the Cities, his road trilogy. So what is it, Summer? Kings of Summer? Or no, that's a different film.
I know he has Wings of Desire. Is that
Wings of Desire, that's his as well.
Paris, Texas is one of my favorite films.
Texas is incredible. But his docs as well, he really knows how to structure his film based off of the story. So like, similar to how I said, like Pope Francis, the documentary in that, it's made to seem like a sermon. I find that like Pina almost reads like an entire ballet, or like Buena Vista Social Club is kind of like going to a concert in a way. He knows how to change his structure depending on what his subject matter is. And I don't think he ever really uses sit-down interviews. Well, in Pope Francis he does, but he really lets still the location speak for itself. Well,
I liked how he used the Interatron in the Pope one.
Yeah.
Because you had the Pope talking directly to you. Definitely like a sermon, but you know. I think that's what I liked about the Chantal Akerman film too, is like even though there are technically interviews, I guess, it just feels more like you're being talked to.
Yeah.
You're in a conversation with this person, although you can't really respond, but they're kind of telling you how they want the story to move forward instead of talking over to like this guy or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or a girl.
It's like, yeah. And then one of my favorites of his,
or non-binary.
Exactly. It's 2019 now. But another one of my favorites, it's not his best film, but Tokyo God, just because he makes an entire documentary about Ozu and has these beautiful verite shots of Japan. and a lot of it's told through Ozu's cinematographer, which I find interesting because Wim Winders was very close with his cinematographer, who's probably one of the best DPs that has existed. What's his name? Where is it? With Robbie Mueller. So similar to how he had that relationship, you can kind of see that relationship between Ozu and his cinematographer too.
Yeah, and Ozu's not a documentary filmmaker, but I talk about him a lot because I almost feel like his movies encapture truth more than like a lot of documentary filmmakers do.
And that's how I feel about like Wim Wenders' narrative films, that I find them, just as truthful as a lot of documentaries I see.
Absolutely.
Cool. So who's your next pick? Because I could go on forever about this.
I know, right? This one was really hard. Because I have to say, it was really a toss-up between the Maysles brothers. Albert Maysles specifically lived longer, so he has a lot more films by himself. But I love their films. Grey Gardens. I love Give Me Shelter. I love The Salesman, which I think I talked about in the last one. And the influences, like, I just love that they kind of pioneered that style. Like, once handheld cameras came out, once like you could bring audio equipment with you, they would have just the two brothers like making these films about these people and just kind of like living in their space and following them around and letting them kind of like narrate how the story goes. And if they popped up in a mirror sometimes, they would be fine with that. And like they kind of really pioneered this style of filmmaking. And so they are kind of inherently like my favorite filmmakers. Just in general, and specifically Albert Maysles. And they really inspired the other people I was having a hard time leaving off my list, which are Heidi, Ewing, and Rachel Grady. So they did Jesus Camp, they did Detropia, they have this wonderful, horrific documentary, 12th in Delaware is the name of that one. So they did 12th in Delaware, which is amazing. Jesus Camp, they just follow these kids around at Christian like Bible camp, which was basically my childhood, so that one had a huge impact on me. Detropia I think was a little less successful. There were some really interesting moments in it, but I know a lot of people from Detroit that are friends of mine really hated it. I thought it was like a really well done film, but I don't have much perspective on what it's like to live in Detroit. And then most recently they have a film on Netflix called One of Us that is about like domestic abuse in the Hasidic Jewish community in New York, and it's a really powerful film. But I love their films, everything they do. They're low-key films, Loki, and they just kind of like take that Maysles Brothers type verite filmmaking, and they're kind of continuing that, just that style now, and they do a really good job, and they make really great films.
Cool.
So what are some of your honorable mentions?
Well, I think I have one more last choice.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, 3. Because I can't leave this long. Similar to your like Maysles, I have Errol Morris is my like classics, especially as someone who really admires camera work and has a background in cinematography. The way he uses the camera to create these like obscure worlds and makes you question humanity and sort of question people. I think he was one of the first documentarians to sort of do that. Like you'll see an Errol Morris film and you'll know it's an Errol Morris film just by his lighting and this like eerie feeling and the canted angles he often uses. And I also really like in all of his films, he will find really, really strange people but not like stigmatize them or not make them seem stupid in a way. He shows you their world and how they're living life, and you're like, are humans really this way? Like, yeah. But then you start to buy into it and you realize just how complex humanity is. And so what's really interesting is I was just looking into some of his backstory, and he's studied a bunch of different things, which you can really see in his films. He studied philosophy, convinced Princeton to let him in to study science, and then studied philosophy and history at Berkeley. And that melding of just sort of knowledge really comes into play, I think, in his films. Some of my favorites of his are, one of his first is Vernon, Florida, and he profiles the residents of a small town in Florida, and it's just crazy what these people are doing. But once again, it doesn't seem like he's judging them as much as they are these like insane characters. I also really like Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control. That's also another one where you start to realize, as much as humans control the animal kingdom in a way, because all the people have connections to animals in their weird jobs, we're still animals in a sense. And also a really good one is The Fog of War, 11 Lessons from the Life of Robert McNamara. And so
that was the first Errol Morris film I saw.
That's intense. That's the one I think I saw because my dad's obsessed with history and like made me watch that to teach me what war really is. So he interviews the former Secretary of Defense and his view on modern warfare, and you just start to realize the people who are in control of war, what they really think of it, and the amount of awareness they have of the bad things they're doing.
Yeah.
And in that one, he uses the Interrotron, which he invented, and that's where I think his science background comes into play. So for those who don't know what the Interrotron is, he invented this way of looking through the camera, and so then you're looking at the interviewer. So instead of it seeming like you're just staring straight in, it has a bit more of a personal effect. And he said it's the greatest way to have like first-person truth. And so in pretty much most of his docs, he'll be doing that. So the person, it looks like they're staring straight at you when they're talking.
And Errol Morris really is like the best interviewer. Like no one else can make a film all based on like one person's interview.
Yeah.
As interesting as like Fog of War or the Donald Rumsfeld film he did, or one of my favorites of his is Tabloid.
Oh yeah, Tabloid's really good too. Yeah.
And of course, Brief History of Time, which
that one was
his science background for sure. Brief History of Time is like one of the most incredible documentaries I've ever seen. Like as far as like aesthetically and filmmaking wise, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like you say, his films are pretty much all interview. And as much as personally I much prefer verite and simple and subtle, his films, I'll always go see them because the way he can get into someone's own personal world through his interviewing and through his camera style, I don't think there's anyone else who could do it better.
Yeah, and I think it's less that I dislike interviews in films. It's like I dislike how most people do interviews in films.
Yeah.
Like I don't love when people are talking to the filmmaker off to the left or something.
Yeah.
I prefer whenever people are talking at the audience a lot of times, and they have to be done like in a way that it's easy. It's hard. I mean, coming from a background of like podcasting, for most of my interviews, it's hard to interview people.
Yeah.
It's hard to like keep the conversation going a lot of times. And if you're really good at it, you're good at it. If you're not good at it, it's obvious. And most people aren't good at it, and that's okay. But Errol Morris is a master at it.
He is. Yeah.
So I do have some runners-up that I want to shout out. Errol Morris was on my runners-up. It was hard to leave him off the list because same reasons why you put him on your list. Love Errol Morris. Werner Herzog. It's one of my favorite filmmakers. I know we differ in that opinion.
Yeah.
Sophie Fiennes, I think, is one of the most interesting filmmakers as far as documentary goes. She does things in documentary that no one else does. So I suggest people see A Pervert's Guide to Ideology, Pervert's Guide to Cinema, Over Your City's Grass Will Grow, and most recently, she did a documentary about Grace Jones, which I think is on Hulu right now or Amazon Prime. But yeah, go see the documentary about Grace Jones. It's wonderful. And if you like Grace Jones' music, it's wonderful. If you don't like it, she's an interesting person either way. And I want to shout out Goran Olson, who did Concerning Violence and Black Power Mixtape. He does these archival films that are just incredibly well done. Hopefully we'll do an episode about those at some point, but Concerning Violence and Black Power Mixtape, go watch them.
Cool.
Do you have any runners-up?
Well, I had Frederick Weissman and then also Laura Portress.
Oh, yeah.
That's how it's pronounced.
I had her.
She has very compelling stuff, and then I'm like, then the stuff she has access to, I really admire.
Yeah, she does amazing stuff, and I love her project, Field of Vision. So it's like a visual journalism unit is what they call it. That's like, they commission films from filmmakers who do really interesting stuff. So one of my favorite documentaries of recent times is The Prison in 12 Landscapes. And so they have a short film from Brett Story, who did that film, about like Amazon workers. That's really good. And they just have a ton of like interesting short films they're all about like political issues, but they do it in a way that's like interesting and really good filmmaking.
And then the last little shout out is the Sensory Ethnography Lab. It's a space where they actually produce and fund ethnography films. So they were behind Sweetgrass, which a lot of people have potentially seen. So that's where it's a program through Harvard, but they give filmmakers sort of money to shoot different ethnography projects on actual film. So
Sweetgrass is so beautiful.
It's so beautiful. So it's ethnography, but beautifully shot. So you can actually watch it. It's not the most amazing or riveting content, but if you're into that sort of subject, just go look it up. And most of their stuff, I think you can watch on their website.
All right, that does it for another episode of a Documentary Podcast.
Thanks for listening again.
And you can check us out on Instagram at a Documentary Podcast.
And our website at documentarypodcast.com.
And subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And go rate and leave us a review so more people can find out about us.
Yeah, and if you have any suggestions of films we should watch, feel free to comment on Instagram or send us an email.
A Documentary Podcast at gmail.com.
Yes.
And find me on Instagram at Joshua LeBure.
And me at CMS Moments.
And the music is by Timothy DeCans.
And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks.
Bye.